Hey, good morning. So today I just feel like I need to say this. Like, I realize that when we come together to worship God, like, if you've never really been to church, like, that's what we're doing right now. We call this our Encountering God environment. We realize that everybody doesn't come in ready to do that. We realize that some of you have had really difficult weeks. You've basically been drugged here, or you feel like spiritually you have been drugged all week, and now you're showing up. And I just want to let you know that Jesus wants to meet you wherever you are. Like, especially if you're tired and broken and overwhelmed, like you've spent no time with him this week. Like he says, come to me if you're overwhelmed and heavy laden, if you're burdened, if you feel like the weight of the world is on you, because I want to give you rest. And that's basically just rest in his presence, conversating with him, communicating with him, spending time with him. Because his thing that he calls you to in life, it's not burdensome. It's a relationship. And it's where we really find our place in the kingdom and where we are loved, where we are encouraged. So if you've come in today just kind of crushed and tired, I want you to know that Jesus wants to meet you in that same place. And he wants to love you and encourage you in that place and in that moment. We're super glad that you're here today. You should have gotten a connection card when you came through those doors. Really just fill that out with your name and email. Check any box that relates to you, or maybe anything that you have a question about, and I will get back with you, in touch with you, and help you with that. So today we're in week 5 of our new series, Lost and Found, and I want to let you know the reason that we're doing this series is because we have a passion for people. You know, we have a desire to see people reconnected with God. We have a desire to see people that aren't connected spiritually become connected. And really, our mission, like our church has this mission, we have this passion, and it's leading all people into a relationship with God. It doesn't matter if they've been seeking God forever, if they've known Christ a little bit, if they have a ton of questions. We want to meet everybody wherever they are and lead them into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, because we believe found people find people. If you have been spiritually saved, if you have a relationship with God, the thing that should drive your life, the thing that should motivate you and push you should be the same exact thing that navigated and really directed Jesus' life on this earth. It was interacting and connecting with people who were disconnected from a loving God. We believe God is still writing our stories so we can help somebody else find theirs as they find his. Like, that's what we believe is the goal of every life that lives on this earth. In this series, we didn't really just want to help Christ followers be able to communicate more clearly or ask better questions or even to become more disciplable. Really, the point of this series to our unchurched friends was just to let them know that we love them exactly where they are. People that are disconnected, we wanted to do this series to say, we love you wherever you're at. And we want to help you along this journey wherever you are. But we also wanted to let them know in that process too, that maybe, just maybe, as we talk about these thresholds, as we talk about these doorways, maybe somebody can identify actually where they're at along the journey, and we can meet them there and help them make next steps. Last week we talked about the threshold number 3, which was becoming open to change. And we said in that bottom line for that sermon was this: becoming open to change becomes easier when you become tired of the same. Like, the same represents kind of a stop sign to someone making a life change or a transition. It's really somebody that lives a life of the same. Their life is boring, predictable. It requires no faith. Like, you can basically identify everything they do within a week by the life that they live. They're really not in a place of following God, because God always asks for change. And change is a big deal. And that's why we're patient with our friends who are unchurched, who don't know God. We pray, we ask God to interact with their life and to give us wisdom on when to say what we need to say to help them further along. But we also push them in a gracious and sensitive way when they become kind of closed off to any other worldview and any other lifestyle, and especially with the Christian worldview and following Jesus. We push them a little bit and we ask them questions Becoming curious about Jesus is a big deal. And change is just as important because it really opens them up to the fourth threshold that we're going to talk about today, the fourth kind of doorway, and that is seeking God. And really seeking God, and some of us in the room know this, it's really a journey. And maybe you remember that moment where you kind of embarked on that quest. And quests are really these kind of adventures, these kind of journeys, and maybe it's something that you experience or something you see, and for some people, a quest, it really crushes your comfort zone along with you and your worldview up to that point. Sometimes we do these quests for the experience. Sometimes we do it to have one of those life-changing moments or just get a spectacular view. Like yesterday, I was on a quest. If some of you looked at my Facebook, I was actually doing a 33-mile race up in the Black Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. And it was probably the hardest, most difficult thing that I've ever done in my life. And really what drew me in was the race director's description of the race. And this is what he said: "Welcome to your quest." You know, in the old days, Native Americans would go on spiritual quest, and that's what he sounds like. He's like a surfer, skateboard guy, and he's like, "Hey, bro," and, you know, he's always doing that. And so that's how he started it, and then he's just like telling you about, you know, when he pulled into the Mount Mitchell parking lot, and he just decided to take off running, and, you know, he ended up being up there for like 8 hours, and then he continues and says, you know, "I made my way down to Black Mountain Campground and found my way in my car. It about killed me. And this remains the only course of mine that I've run in its entirety, and I can tell you that this is heaven and this is hell." You know, he's just like, "It's the hardest thing I've ever experienced, and this will most likely be the hardest thing you've ever done. It's not meant for that. You know, it's meant for the beauty." And, you know, he's always got these pictures where he's like this on like mountaintops and stuff. And that's what intrigued me. You know, he said, "It's not about me trying to kill you with the 12,000 feet of gain and loss and just making you go through these ridiculous trails and crossing creeks to get to aid stations. But it's really about the beauty in the journey. It's about the beauty in the quest." And I have to ask you, have you ever had kind of a quest experience? You know, was it a road trip? Was it something very difficult in your life that you just felt like you needed to kind of have a conversation with God, or just go on this kind of lone adventure to kind of really figure out who you were? Maybe it's jumping out of a plane. You know, for some people it's the Grand Canyon, and I'm always jealous of those people, and they're always like, the pictures never do it justice, and, you know, have these magnificent shots. But I feel like we're all on these quests. And honestly, yesterday was an amazing experience. And I've had similar experiences. And even going to Africa and Romania and Russia, like, those quests for my life were significant. But honestly, when I think about my spiritual quest and what that experience was like, the things that I experienced outside of that are incomparable. Like, I was always a church kid. Like, my parents forced me to go to church my whole life. And, hey, if they live in your house, you do that. It's good. But when I turned 15, that's when I really began to process, is all this stuff true? And is it real? And then at 23 years of age, that's when I came into a relationship with Jesus. And that's when the real quest began. That's when the real, like, knowing and following kind of married one another. And I'm learning still, like, it never ends. And just, it's been filled with joy. It's been filled with sorrow. It's been filled with faith. It's been filled with seeing God do a ton of things in my life. And I'll never forget that when that quest began. Because really, that is the most important one. I really felt like I had, at one point in my life, to come to a conclusion of what I really believed. I needed a conclusion to kind of offset the doubt and fear and really the tension that was robbing me of life. Because really, I wanted the life that God wanted for me just as much, I think, as He wanted it for me. And it all began on that spiritual quest of faith. And I think that's where a lot of people are today. I mean, I think some of you, part of coming to our church, it is part of your quest. It is part of your journey. and you've trusted a Christian, you've become curious, you become aware of another way of life and thinking beyond and outside of your own worldview, and that curiosity has led you to become open to change. But now you kind of find yourself at this crossroad. You know, are you okay where you're at for what you know and what you understand? Or do you really need to pursue Jesus? Is he somebody that you need to include in that quest and know him personally? And if that's you today, I want to let you know I'm excited for you. Like, I'm cheering for you. I'm praying for you because it's huge in this process of life and the process of the thing that we called faith. And I really want you to discover and understand Jesus' plan for your life. For a lot of you, maybe today is going to be the day you begin this kind of quest of faith. And the bottom line for the day, and the thing that I really want to drive just our heart's understanding and where we're focused at today, but it's this. The quest of faith, it really does find its beauty in a person and not a principle. The beauty of our quest of faith, it finds its beauty in a person and not in a principle. I want us to look at just one verse today. It's a verse that I read a few weeks back that I've just been unable to stop thinking about it. I think it correlates with everything that we are talking about today, and especially as we think about a spiritual quest. And the verse is John chapter 14, verse 1. You can open up your device or just read it with me today off the screen. But this is what Jesus said. Don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. Don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. Now, immediately, he uses the word troubled, so we know that there's some sort of tension that is involved in what's about to be said and what has been said. And when you look back in the 4th chapter, in John chapter 13, Jesus has kind of unpacked a number of things. He has washed the disciples' feet. He has been betrayed by Judas. And he has been giving them kind of snippets of, you know, the things that you've been hearing about, the suffering that I've been talking about, my imminent death that is coming. It's getting closer and it's getting closer. And so their hearts are troubled. Like, it would be similar to somebody saying, hey, I have this great plan for your life and spending time with you, and then eventually one day saying, well, it's time for me to go, but I think it's all going to work out. You know, we would be deeply discouraged, and that's what that word troubled means. It means that they were agitated. It means they were irritated. It means they were really, really discouraged. My translation would say they're losing their minds on the inside. Like, this is not a great moment for them, despite the time that Jesus had been preparing them. Because again, you go back those few verses and you understand that life is getting ready to change in a huge way, but they didn't see the big picture. They didn't see down the road, because the change that occurred that Jesus is speaking of, it's impacting us today. Thousands of years it has been impacting people. He's going to introduce just a brand new way of spiritual life. There's getting ready to be this big paradigm shift in their way of thinking, because up until that point, all they knew was kind of this Old Testament theology. You know, it was about knowing God in principle somewhat, but it not really affecting every part of your life. You had to come to temple to experience God. You had to go through the priest to experience his presence. But now Jesus is shifting that. And he says in verse 34 and 35 of John chapter 13, he's given them this new way of life. It's no longer about religion. It's about relationship. And this is what he says: a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also have to love one another. And by this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Now, I feel like in this moment, it would be very similar to living in only a black and white world. And then somebody, you know, kind of like the YouTube videos where they give the person the glasses that enables them to see in color. They can finally see colors and they just put them on and they're just like blown away. And they begin to become emotional and they begin to just see life differently. And I think when he made that statement, it wasn't just simply about loving God with all of your heart, but now it's like you love people the way that I have loved you. And Jesus would go on to say, love the Lord God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And for them, that was a big deal because it's not about principle any longer. It wasn't just about thought or idea any longer. Their standing with God wasn't going to be about keeping laws or keeping rules or behavior modification and change. It wasn't about them being morally or ethically perfect, or at least trying to appear that way. They were experiencing a departure from a way of life that they had only known for their whole existence. They're experiencing a brand new thought of what is going to take place as I follow Jesus, because now they're understanding it's not about a principle, it's about a person. And that person being Jesus Christ, and not just knowing of him, but actually knowing him and following him. It had to be a big deal in their minds and hearts. And that's why they were troubled. But it was absolutely necessary for them to experience Jesus for the beauty of their quest of faith. And here's the reality. Some of you and a lot of people get stuck in the same place that they were, with more of an Old Testament mindset. And that's why when people ask you about what Jesus is doing in your life, your normal answer is a church answer, or it's relegated to a program or an event or something way far gone in your past. There was a shift. It was no longer about a principle, but a person. And Jesus would go on to say in verse 14, let not your hearts be troubled. Peter and him had been talking, and he's telling him that the suffering has to take place for this new way of life. And of course, Peter says, I won't deny you. He does deny him. And Jesus goes into the don't let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe in me also. In the midst of this transition, in the process of this quest of faith, he mentions their hearts. Now, he's not talking about an internal organ, a physical organ, but he's actually talking about who you and I are, who they were internally, what makes them up on the inside, their emotions, the spiritual aspect, the things that we cannot see. He was saying, I don't want this part of you that makes you who you are to be troubled and discouraged for what I have just said and what is about to come. Why would they be troubled? I think it was because of the way they believed, what they trusted in, what their faith was in. And that's where we have that differing principle and person mindset. And he says a word that is deeply important to think about, especially if you're here today and you are thinking about following Jesus, about seeking Jesus specifically. And the word that he says is believe. I think a lot of people connect with this word mentally, or you think about, I believe that, but it's really only about information. It's really only about knowledge. And here's the reality. You can say you believe something, but the reality with that is if it doesn't affect your lives, if it doesn't affect your actions or bring change into your life, it's really not what you believe. It's simply a belief in your life. If you say you believe something and it has no change, or it doesn't do anything within your life to transition you from new thinking or new ways, then that's not what you believe. It's simply a belief in something, and those are two different things. The word that Jesus uses, it's a verb. It's kind of this imperative command. It means to put one's faith in or trust in with an implication. Please get this. With an implication that actions are going to follow and be connected to that type of belief. When I say I believe something, it should affect every aspect of my life, and possibly even including change. And if you really say, I believe in Jesus, then there should be actions that follow that belief and not simply be verbiage of a idea or information. That type of faith, that type of belief is connected to a person. and that being Jesus. And that's the beauty of our view. The disciples, I think, believed in God, but it was mostly more in principle, and that's why they were struggling with his departure, because they had known God up until that point, very much so from an Old Testament point of view. But that type of view, your heart will be troubled when something happens. That's why you have so many people that are like this spiritually when something bad happens to their life, is because they're only connected with God based on thought or based on experience and not based in relationship. But Jesus wanted them to have a faith that really would overwhelm those moments when we begin to feel troubled, that would process through those moments when we keep being troubled. And it's actually not just the word believe as in just believe this and you're finished, but it's a keep on believing. Continue to believe. Keep on believing in me. That is what will settle a heart that's troubled. That's what will encourage faith in those hard moments. And I love that Jesus made the statement, and he made it so he is unique in what he has said, because up until that point, most people believed in God, but now he's saying, believe in me also. Transition from this belief being just an idea or principle to it being an actual person and a relationship. It involves knowing and following. It's not just about knowing information and knowing verses, but it's about knowing him personally and then following him throughout your life. He would go on to say, if you love me, keep my commandments. You know, if someone says, man, I just love Jesus, I'm looking at their life and just seeing if they're really applying everything that Jesus has said, if they're really emulating everything that Jesus did within his life, because he said the best way to show your love for me is to do what I ask you to do what I tell you to do. Jesus is who you have to seek. Really, Jesus and his resurrection is the foundation of our faith. It's not the inerrancy of Scripture. It's not the virgin birth. Those things are super important, and I believe each of those things. But the thing that really our faith is built on is Jesus and his resurrection. It's who he is. That's what dictates my life. It's really what gives me the peace and the security that what I believe is true and that I have faith, and it doesn't matter beyond that two realities. He is the person our Quest of Faith finds beauty in. You know, we've talked about all the doorways, all the thresholds. We've talked about trusting a Christian. We've talked about becoming curious. We've talked about being open to change. And here's the reality. Somebody can do all three of those things without a relationship with Jesus. You know, for some people, that's just the process. But for somebody who is really seeking this fourth threshold, seeking Jesus, man, it's imperative. You know, that's where the life change occurs. That's where the true journey begins. This is where somebody becomes to pursue him. This is where seeking becomes a pursuit. This is where Jesus, not just God, becomes the focus point. This is where faith isn't just a principle, something that's just started, but it actually becomes alive. It actually involves movement. It actually lives and breathes, and it's about a person. That person is Jesus Christ. And it's about a relationship instead of religion. And I want to say something to Christ followers. If you know Christ personally, you have a relationship with him, you're continually following him. One of the best things you can do for our unchurched friends is live the kingdom out in front of them. Like, truly apply the teachings of Jesus in front of them as you include them, as you invite them into your life. You know, that's one of the reasons why we go to Atlanta. That's one of the reasons why we have partnered with Good Samaritan, because we knew Jesus loved the least of these. We know Jesus continually met the needs of people, and by us doing those things, it's not about anything that we can do to better improve our standing with God. We do those things out of an affection for Jesus, who has changed our lives. And your friends who are unchurched or who have not connected spiritually, that is one of the best things for them to see, because they'll say, why do you do that? Why would you spend a weekend with these people? Why would you give money that you've earned for your family to bless somebody else? And it opens those conversations because Jesus has done the same thing for me. Like, he has met my needs and he's sacrificed. You can also include them in your prayer life. Open it up to them. Say, man, can I pray for you? Is there anything I can, ask God for you this week? Is there anything I can pray about specifically? You can also be completely real with them, completely authentic with them. And I think what we tend to do is only give people the good stuff. When life is going really well, we don't open up to, I really hate my job, or I'm really struggling to pay the bills, or, my relationships in my home are going down the drain, and I'm really struggling to trust God. And, sometimes I think, does he even exist? Letting them know, man, I've had the same experience. And really, this is where your God stories come into play, because 5 years ago, I really questioned God just like you're doing today. And this happened to kind of remind me of where he's at in my life. And then I saw that he did take care of that need. And really, just you being that open to someone else could make a huge difference in their lives, instead of just posting cheesy Christian memes or quoting me or somebody else. Really opening up your life for other people to get a view and to look in and see what Jesus is like. Invite them into your life. Model seeking for them. This pursuit that we're on, this quest that we're on, it's not a one-time event. It is continual. And one of the best things that you can do is model seeking Jesus for them. I am saying that every believer, as they follow Jesus, gets to model exactly what we're talking about. And this kind of modeling is precious and valuable, and it really celebrates the posture and the process of seeking after Jesus. We have to live out the kingdom of God in front of our friends. And here's the thing, if you can't be that real with those people in your life, and ask Jesus to help you through that. Ask us to help you through that, because those are hard moments, I believe, where faith is actually activated and where you're changing things and allowing God to move in your life. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just reality. It's just life. And I would rather go through those moments and go through that tension than never being used for the kingdom of God. Something I want to say to anybody here that maybe you would consider yourself unchurched, or, you don't know Jesus. You know of Jesus, but you don't know him. It's really just religion. I want to encourage you, as you're contemplating seeking him specifically, to really count the cost. Like, Jesus isn't just a Sunday only thing. Like, changes will happen. There's implications that will occur when you truly seek him. It's going to happen. He's not a Sunday only thing. It's not just a bare minimum type of thing, because he asks for everything. And this is what I want you to think about. Is there anything in this life that's truly valuable that doesn't cost something? You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to cheat faith. I wouldn't want to cheat grace. I would want the thing that cost him, and it would cost me. So count the cost as you're thinking about and contemplating seeking him. I also want to encourage you to spend time in community with Christ followers that you trust. Like, just show up. Even if you don't know what's going on during their community group events or even at their homes. Like, just show up and observe and ask questions and actually be able to process that they're meeting for a purpose that is beyond themselves. It's beyond everything. And it brings people together. Last thing I want to encourage you with, if you're not really connected in a relationship with God, is to seek Jesus specifically. Like, look at his life. Look at how he treated people. Look at what he said. And again, seek Jesus, not just God. Because when people want to experience God, or I want to know what God's like Jesus said, me and the Father are one. Jesus is the Son. Jesus is, he's life. There will be changes. See, I went on my quest yesterday. I went on the race. But a lot of things prior to that had to change and had to be different before I was ready to even attempt it. Like training had to change. I couldn't run roads anymore. I couldn't go on the Tweetsie Trail and run that any longer. I had to go up into the hard sections of mountains, and I had to climb. And I mean, my legs and my calves and my feet were continuously sore. I had to spend time with people that were further along than me to get their advice, because I wanted to experience the beauty of this quest. And one of the strange things with my quest was I had to buy one of these. This is called a Life Straw. This is a device that I can basically pop this cap open and pop this cap open and stick this down into any creek, in any water source, and I can drink water from this. It says it's 99.9 accurate on getting all the bacteria out. You know, it was just a reality with the race. It was something that was required. It was something that I absolutely had to have. And I needed it because the volunteers couldn't get to where we were running. And I mean, a volunteer doesn't want to hike for 10 miles to get a thing of water to help people out. So these things were required. Here's what I know as I interact and talk with people. For some of you, you are on a spiritual quest, and currently there's no joy with it. Like there's no freedom in it. There isn't any beauty in it. And I want to say this. Jesus is life. Jesus is the person that provides the beauty for your quest of faith. And Jesus, I mean, he is the life straw. In John, he said in verse 14 and 6, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And nobody can come to the Father except through me. Jesus has made this quest really about himself. And so when you seek him, you find life. You find the beauty of the quest. You find the person and not the principle. The quest of faith, and really in the beauty that's involved, it finds its way in a person and not a principle. As the band comes back up, I really want to encourage you, wherever you're at today, that Jesus wants to meet you exactly where you are. And the next step question that I feel like could be great for everybody in this room, it is this. Is your faith what you say you believe? Is it about a principle, or is it about a person? If you said, Chris, man, I know Jesus personally, like I know him and I follow him, then I want to say your answer is awesome. And I want to let you know that if that is your answer, that is what your belief is based in, then it should be about the same thing that Jesus is about, which is people. Like you should be living out your faith in front of your unchurched friends, connecting with people who are far from God and helping them along with next steps. But if your answer really is a principle, and by a principle, I mean you kind of have these spiritual rules and you kind of go by laws and you try to be a good person in your own strength. Like if that's you, I want to encourage you today that the beauty in your journey, your spiritual journey, it will not happen until you begin to seek Jesus specifically. And along the journey, he wants to meet you exactly where you are. He wants you to begin a new quest of faith with him. Like he's so worthy of your trust. Like he loves you and he will never let you down. He wants to be the king of your heart. I know how hard it can be to start over, to change, similar to what the disciples were experiencing, this brand new system, this new way of life, this new understanding of faith. I know that's hard to make that transition, but with anything in life that is good, it's always worth it. I'm going to pray, and maybe today is your day that you're ready to begin seeking Jesus specifically. That's awesome. And really, I want to encourage you, and I'm doing this myself, is I'm reading a chapter of John a day. and I'm writing down the answer to these questions. What does this say about Jesus? What does this say about me? And then what should change or be different in my life because of what Jesus has said? And then actually living that out. That's where your life change is going to happen. This quest without him, this quest of religion, there'll never be any beautiful views to it. Look at him, listen to what he said, and truly embrace what he's asking of your life. And maybe today it's the first time that you've realized, I only have this idea of Jesus. I only have this religion of Jesus. There isn't a personal relationship. There's no daily interaction with him. There's no faith required. Maybe today is the first day you've truly understood that you don't know him. I'm going to pray and I want to encourage you, if that's where you're at today, to invite him into your life. He's willing to meet anyone at any time, wherever they are. And I'm going to pray a prayer, and a prayer doesn't save anybody. It's the faith behind it. And it's going to go something like this. God, I understand for the first time that I'm not you. And I can't save myself. And I've really only understood you in the sense of religion and not a relationship. Would you come into my life? And would you rescue me? Would you give me the faith to understand and to follow you? That's what that prayer is going to say. That's what I'm going to say. And if God has spoke to you today and you realize what you've had up in this point is not a quest, it's simply information, I want to invite you to pray wherever you are. We're not going to embarrass you or ask you to come up. And after I pray, I want to encourage you to check on your connection card. I want to know more about Jesus, or meet us at the Next Step area immediately after. The beauty of the quest is found in a person, not in a principle. I'm going to pray, and if that's you today, pray with me wherever you're seated, and then let's talk a little bit afterwards.